Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked, locked. Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. Guineith Isaacs is scheduled to be with us, but we're having difficulty contacting her in Australia, so right now it's just me. We broadcast 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains for the time being. And if you'd like to call us, 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line is up and running, 605-477-3249. As many of you know, I have thrown my hat in the ring. Again, this will be round number 4 at the Laclede Electric Company, a cooperative allegedly, where allegedly the corporation for the distribution of electricity is owned by the membership. So each member is an owner of the corporation, and each member gets to vote. So if you have a family that has an electric meter, one vote for the board of directors may be cast for new board of directors members or to reelect the existing board. So it's your choice. You get one vote per customer. Well, if you're a customer and if you don't like the board of directors, you may get a petition together. And if you get 15 or more names that the corporation verifies are members of the corporation, and if those people say and sign that they would like you to be a nominee for the board of directors, you can run. So I've done that 4 times. And so in August, I will be on stage for the 4th time running for the board. And I would like a couple things. One, I would like our total electric bills reduced. Because I can't just say the electric rates, because they manipulate the electric rates by a couple things. One, they charge a monthly fee of $27 to have what they call access to electricity, which really means it's a fee to have a meter. Okay? If you wanted access to the gas pump at your local gas station, it'd be like having a fee in order to be able to pull up to the pump and then take the nozzle from the pump and put it in your tank. That would be an access fee. Then you would have the meter tell you how much you have pumped at what rate, and you'd pay the bill for the gasoline dispensed. Well, the electric company charges $27 a month for meters. And if you're a farmer and you've been duped by the Soil and Water Conservation District and the U.S. Department of Agriculture, also known as USDA, you might have many meters because farms are spread out, and so you might have wells here and there scattered throughout your farm because that's what's recommended by the USDA and the Soil and Water Conservation District. You might have like 10 meters on your farm. 10 meters at $27 per meter is $270 per month. That's before you get the first watt of electricity. The electricity is extra on top of the meter fee, which they don't call a meter fee. They call it an access fee. Well, I'd like that changed. I want the meter fees to go away. I would like smart meters to be optional. If someone is so naive as to want a smart meter in their home or their apartment building, what can I say? But I don't want one, and I want it removed. So in order to get the electric fees removed, in order to get my smart meter removed, And in order to lower the per kilowatt charge for electricity, the only thing I can do is run for the board of directors. And I said that I would be glad to serve on the board. I would serve for free, no charge. And the board gets compensated quite heavily. Typically, the president of the board gets $500 to show up for a meeting. $500. Now, that meeting is a 3-hour meeting. So how many people do you know who make $500 for 3 hours worth of work? Now, if the other members show up, they get $400 for 3 hours work. That's pretty good. And then they get a free lunch on top of that. And they get travel expenses. They get a per diem. They get insurance. They get health insurance, dental insurance, travel insurance, life insurance, because they're really important people. That's what it's like. And I said I would forgo all that if the other members do. Now, why would I say I would do it if they do it? Because if I just do it, it doesn't mean much. But if I can get all 9 members of the board to do what I do and follow, then we'd save a significant amount of money. That's step number 1. Step number 2 is we reduce all the executive compensation. I've asked in writing the CEO, what is your compensation? He won't tell me. In writing, he won't tell me. He won't tell me orally either. I asked if we have been involved, we meaning the members of Laclede Electric Cooperative in Missouri, have been involved in litigation, lawsuits. Are we being sued? He won't tell me. He won't tell me how many suits are ongoing and who's involved. And then I asked, how much do we pay for our legal fees? He won't tell me. And here's the most amazing piece. So I sent him an email a couple days ago. And I'm going to read it to you. His name is Mark Rocker, R-O-E-C-K-E-R, M-A-R-C is his first name, Rocker, R-O-E-C-K-E-R. He's the CEO and general manager of Laclede Electric Cooperative. If you want his phone number, it's 417-532-3164, 417-532-3164. You can ask him any questions you'd like. Well, so I sent him an email on July 2nd. It says, Mark, I will need at least, and I try to be very brief because I know his time's valuable. Mark, I will need at least 10 minutes on stage to explain my thoughts at the annual meeting. Next sentence. Which, by the way, is the reason why we have an annual meeting. To elect the board, not be the carnival that you have allowed it to be. Next sentence. More members have nominated me to be on the board than any other candidates. Period. Can you make that happen? Thank you, Vincent Finelli. So what kind of a response do you think I would get from that? Well, it's kind of simple. One sentence. Mr. Finelli. I'm always Mr. Finelli. Wants to make sure that there's distance between me and him. The Laclede Electric Board of Directors and the cooperative attorney have made it very clear that, again this year, candidate speeches will be held to 2 minutes. Thanks. Mark C. Rocker, CEO, General Manager, Laclede Electric Cooperative, 417-532-3164. Let me read that again. And I want to just discuss a few points about what this really means. The Laclede Board of Directors and the cooperative attorney have made it very clear that again this year the candidate speeches will be held to 2 minutes. Thanks, Mark Rocker. What he's saying is, I have only 2 minutes to make my case. It is impossible to make my case as to why I should be a candidate and convince a couple thousand people to pay attention at this carnival where they give out prizes and hot dogs and popcorn and soda, and gifts. It's a carnival. And I'm supposed to make my case in 2 minutes. It's impossible. The guy that they hire to mow the lawn gets 15, 20 times more interview time than I will have on stage. The whole purpose of this is to make sure that there is absolutely no way that no candidate from the membership, nominated from the membership, can be elected to the board. It has never happened, never in the history of the cooperative, that a candidate nominated from the membership or by the membership has ever been elected to the board of directors. Who makes the rules to keep us at only 2 minutes? The board of directors. The board of directors selects a committee to make sure that they get reelected. The committee selected by the board of directors, the incumbents who are running for reelection, select a person to be the chairman. The chairman and a couple other people select who are going to run against the incumbents. One year, they selected a Walmart cashier to run a multi-million-dollar corporation. She had no clue about electricity, how it works, how a corporation works, but they selected her because why? I asked the chairwoman of the nominating committee, how do you select someone? Because obviously you haven't selected me. And I've been running for four times. Why haven't you selected me? Well, we want to make sure everybody has an equal opportunity. We want to give everybody a chance. And I said, so are you pleased with how you've done? Oh, yeah. We're real pleased. You've nominated someone who is a cashier at Walmart. No clue. Now, we think everybody should have a chance. That's what's wrong with America. Now, I don't know the gal who was the cashier, but she lives in my little hamlet of 100 people. I've never met her. She's probably a nice person. But being a nice person does not mean you're qualified for a job. How would you like it if your surgeon were selected on the same criteria? Well, he's a nice guy. She's a nice gal. We haven't done surgery before. Never been to medical school. Never been educated about business or corporate affairs or economics or finance or even Ohm's law of electricity. But that's okay because we want to make sure everybody has a chance. So if you think that person should be your surgeon, vote for that person. That's what this is all about. Actually, the bottom line is they put candidates up to run against the incumbents who have no chance. What chance does a Walmart cashier have to run against the incumbent? What chance? None. That's the whole point. That's why they put these candidates up there. It's a sham. It's a farce. And I'm trying to do something about that. But it's an uphill battle because I'm working with the people who don't know what's going on. They have no idea. They think that the annual meeting is about hot dogs and prizes, toasters and things like that. So I'll keep you posted as to this uphill battle. But every time I write them a letter, they copy their attorney, and their attorney charges $225 an hour. So every time I utter something, they bring the attorney in. Why? Because they're afraid I might win. It's remote. It's really remote. But I might, if enough people are paying attention. So I have to figure out what can I do in my 2 minutes to gather the attention of a couple thousand people who are interested in prizes and toasters and big screen TVs. We'll be right back with Guineith Isaacs. Jason's engineering the broadcast in Minnesota, and Guineith Isaacs is with us. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, a little muffled. I think it's because of your cell phone versus the landline. So it's a little overmodulated. At least that's what I'm hearing. But it's a long way to Australia.
How is that? If I stand back a bit, how's that?
Just a little bit better. Yes, very good. And we can increase the amplitude at our end.
Okay.
Jason's an expert at that. So, Guineith, you are in Australia, and so some people might wonder, what the heck does talking with our correspondent every week for 2 hours in Australia have to do with preparedness? Well, a couple broadcasts ago, you and I talked about things like, how much does it cost to live in Australia? Now, what's that got to do with preparedness? Well, Let's say you want to move someplace else. Let's say you want to jump ship and leave the United States or wherever you are and go to Australia. Well, you just found out that it's unaffordable. You can buy a row house in Australia for like $1 million with no property whatsoever. You know, you walk out your front door and you're on the sidewalk, that kind of a thing. $1 million. Or if you want one that's not in the combat zone, $2 million. Is that correct, Guineith?
That's about the sum of it. And $6 a gallon for gasoline.
Yeah.
How does our economy even function?
Well, that's what I was wondering.
Just under $6 a gallon for gasoline. And our dollar's not even worth as much as yours.
Guineith, what does it cost for ground beef? Do you have an idea? You probably don't buy much of that because you've got a farm. But what would a person pay for a typical 80% beef, 20% fat, which would not be the best stuff? That would be like below average, I would guess, or maybe even average. What would that cost? Because here it's about $3.50 a pound.
Oh gosh, what for ground beef? You're looking at between $8 and $11 a kilo. So that's probably around about $5 a pound.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so
it's pretty expensive.
Yeah,
so that's just the ordinary stuff. That's not the prime.
Right. So, Guineith, I know you have a whole bunch of things to talk about, but what is it that makes Australia so darn expensive? What happened? Is it regulations? Is it hidden taxes? Is it graft? Is it corruption? Is it greed? Where did that come from?
I'd say it's all of the above.
Okay.
I would really say that it's all of the above. We're overtaxed, we're overregulated, the politicians are corrupt, all the regular Aussies know it, and we're all fed up, you know. And I hang out on Facebook groups where basically Aussies and New Zealanders get together and whinge and moan and complain and expose about the things that their government's doing. And it's never ending.
And so, complaining about it, how much good does that do?
I suppose it makes individual people feel better, but I don't know what sort of an effect it has in the long run, except that what I do know is that these globalists, they operate to a playbook, okay? And according to their playbook, everything that they do to you, they have to tell you about it first, and you actually have to agree to it. So if you go online and say, well, actually, I think that this is all baloney, then, you know, it makes it a lot more difficult for them to do it, whatever it is, whatever they are planning to do. But even so, I would say that that probably Australia and New Zealand are both pretty well doomed at this point in time. Because
doomed as in doomed as in doom and gloom doomed?
I would say pretty well heading into a Mad Max type situation.
Hold that thought. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. And we just mentioned the high cost of living in Australia, around $5 for the average type of ground beef, gasoline at $6 a gallon, $1 million for a row home in the combat zone, $2 million if you want less graffiti on the side of your row home and you want to live in an area where you only need one gun instead of two in case the first gun misfires. Actually, you can't even have guns.
What a play!
Yeah, and you can't even. Can't even have a gun.
I don't want those around here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're living in a row house, you've got Buckley's chance of ever getting a firearm. Okay?
Right.
Why do you think there's so many carjackings happening in the middle of Melbourne and in the Melbourne suburbs? They are an unarmed nation. They're a bunch of idiots. They handed their guns in probably about 10 or 15 years ago because the government told them to. And what's happening now is what always happens when people give their guns in. The criminals don't obey the law. And the criminals didn't give their guns in. And so the criminals have basically, realised that they've got an unarmed populace and are now having a field day.
Yeah. Well, I saw images of that forced gun turn-in Europe, and especially in England. And what happened is people were just lining up, just delighted to turn over antique firearms. I'm talking about absolutely magnificent target pistols, target rifles, the kind of thing that you just don't see anymore. I'm talking about Winchester Model 52 target rifles that are several $1,000s a piece in 22 long rifle. I'm talking about high standard target pistols, Smith & Wesson, revolver target pistols as well, or target revolvers, as well as 22 caliber target pistols, as well as, the 32, 38, 357 and everything else. But they were in that pile, and they were soon to be picked up by this electromagnet that you would see in an auto salvage yard, where they pick up the car with an electromagnet, they drop it into a shredder, and then the vehicle is shredded. That was the next step. These magnificent works of art and craftsmanship.
Bad.
That's what happened.
That's just completely tragic. And what's happening in England now and what's happening in Australia now is, basically a direct consequence of people handing in their firearms. Gun control is a lie and it's a farce. It doesn't work. Criminals never, ever, ever hand in their firearms because they're criminals, and why would they? And most of them have more brains than most of the ordinary people out there. It's unfortunate, but it's true. Jesus told us all to be as wise as serpent and as innocent as doves. And Christians out there, good people out there, seem to latch onto the innocent as doves bit and forget about the wise as serpent bit. We've got to be really, really quite cunning in this world. And Jesus told us to be cunning. He said, don't be a pushover. Be wise. Be wise like a serpent. Recognize that it's an evil world out there. And people aren't sitting under olive trees singing Kumbaya. And that's just how it is.
Yes. Well, here in America, hopefully, we still have a modicum of common sense, at least some people, where they won't turn in their guns. I mean, just because the government corporation says you shall do this. I bought when you mentioned criminals don't turn their guns in, I have, many years ago, I was at a gun show, and there was a guy selling this antique, and it was a Saturday night special. I mean, it was the cheapest of the cheapest of the cheap in terms of quality and everything else. It was a double barrel percussion cap Saturday night special. That's the term for a cheap gun. And it was $29. And I was able to legally buy it. And this thing does not work. I mean, it's just, it couldn't fire anything, even if it had to. And the only person that would have that back then would be a criminal. Nobody else would have such a piece of junk as that. And I bought it because it is a piece of junk. And it was, $29 as a curiosity to just remember that criminals have had these things for a long time. And even though it was legal for just about everybody to have a firearm back then, this was still a piece of junk. So I just wanted to share that that it's been going on for a long time. Criminals have had guns for a long time.
Yeah.
Gwyneth,
well,
you mentioned...
I met some of my husband's friends who are criminals, and they have arsenals that anyone would be proud of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep. It's just how it is. And, it's, they can get any weapon they want, anytime they want, because they know who to call, and the person that they call is going to be happy to sell it to them.
Yeah, for a high price.
But we're not in it. The
Gwyneth, you mentioned...
is not in their network, and they're not going to deal with them.
You mentioned Mad Max. Tell us what you mean by New Zealand and Australia headed toward a Mad Max scenario. What does that mean?
Okay, it's like this. At the beginning, at the very first Mad Max movie, which is not the one that most Americans normally think is the first one. It's a movie. You could probably watch it online. I think it's actually on YouTube, even if it's pay-per-view. But it's not the Road Warrior. It's the one before that. So there's actually two Mad Max movies which were made before the Tina Turner one. Thunderdome. But most Americans only think that there is one, because the other one, I think it was only really released in Australia and New Zealand. But in that movie, what happened was basically the world was taken over by criminal gangs. There was some sort of, threat of apocalypse or societal breakdown happened. Shush. I'll let you out in a minute. Dog wants out. There was some sort of societal breakdown, okay? And basically criminal gangs took over. And it's very, very interesting because, for one thing, that film was basically, the first Mad Max movie was basically filmed in this rural neighborhood, in a town that's probably around about half an hour's drive from here, called Clunes, Clunes. And so when the Mad Max movie sort of shows these things unfolding, I look at the road, down the road, and I look around me, and I sort of go, I could see that happening here, because there is an element of the Australian population that's absolutely like that. And probably the only thing that would be our saving grace here, where we are locally in this area, is that so many of the farmers still have their firearms, and they are not going to give them up, not for anybody. Okay? And, and I'm told that there's a lot of unregistered firearms out there. Now, I don't know anything, do I? But I think that people are sort of aware of this. People on the blue team are sort of aware of this, and this makes them a little bit more careful when they go out and about. It kind of hinders them from doing what they would love to do in this sort of area. You know what I mean? And, every few years, one of the local farmers decides that he's had enough and goes on a little bit of goes and inflicts some karma on another one of the local farmers. That happens now and again here. And usually, if you scratch the surface, you'll find that it's been a long-running feud. And, usually they have to, usually the people don't go to hospital at the end of it. They go straight to the morgue. And but that has been known to happen around here. And so I think that here is actually probably going to be, it is actually a lot more bearable than most other places because, for another thing, we've got cell signal a little bit better than what we had, but I'm still only on 2 bars on the cell phone. So you talk about these areas where the cell signal is not quite as strong. And this is definitely one of those areas. It's strong enough to use, but it's not a 5. I don't think they'll ever roll out 5G here. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Yes, and, people come to visit our farm, and they tell me their cell phones don't work in this area. And I think it's wonderful. For me, it's wonderful until they shut down the landlines. And I think that's coming soon, too. Within a few years, they'll tell us that, it's so expensive, and there are only 3 people on your road that have a landline. And the reason that fewer and fewer people have a landline is because the cost keeps going up, the quality keeps going down, the internet over the landlines, DSL, digital subscriber line, is just so spotty. It's terrible. And I don't remember growing up in the United States in the 1950s and the 1960s and having problems with telephone lines. I don't remember that because we didn't have problems. The telephone service was up 99.997% of the time. Literally, it was probably the most reliable thing there was, even better than electricity, way better than electricity. Telephone system was the best of the best, but not anymore. Not anymore. And the more we pay for it, the more they say it costs so much to maintain it that we can't afford to fix it. Why is that? Why is that it costs more and they can't fix it? We'll be right back. I've lived in Missouri, and as long as I've been a farmer since the late 1980s, I've been a farmer. I got to tell you that I have not seen a farmer come up to me and say, "Hey, Vin, there's a better way of doing that. Hey, Vin, if you try this, it'd be a lot easier. Hey, Vin, why don't you try such and such?" It's never happened. I've never had a farmer come up to me and offer advice and counsel. Why is that? Well, I don't think it's just farmers. I think it's pretty much everybody. I think if someone's cutting his lawn with a mower, let's say it's a push mower, and he's in a village, I think the neighbors would just ignore him, and instead of saying, "Hey, there's a better way of doing that, and if you use your mower and you're going uphill, the engine won't be oiled properly and that thing's going to burn out really quickly. You ought to try going this other direction instead, or try a 2-cycle engine, which doesn't matter which direction the mower or the engine is tilted because it's lubricated from the fuel mixture and oil and gasoline rather than having a crankcase that will not properly lubricate if you're going up and down hills." Farmers don't seem to help each other, and I don't think neighbors help each other. It's hard to see anybody helping each other. Is that the way it is in Australia as well?
Generally, yeah. Most people in suburban Australia, this is how it's been for years. It's not how it was when I was growing up in New Zealand. But in suburban Australia, people won't even know the people who live next door to them. They quite literally never ever speak with them. And that's in the suburbs. But it's, in a lot of rural areas, people actually do talk with each other. It is really different living in a rural area because normally when you move into a rural community, you buy a piece of land. You might have 5,000 acres of land, But I'll tell you what, everybody in the district knows the history of that 5,000 acres of land, and they know that you've moved on to it, and they will know who you are before you move on to it. That's just about how it is.
It's just like that.
Move on to 5,000 acres of land and have lots of peace and comfort and isolation and so on and so forth. There's going to be a dozen other farmers living in the area, and they are all sticky beaks, is the word we have in Australia. They're all nosy. They want to know you. They want to know where you've come from. They want to know what you're going to do with that land. And they want to know everything that there is to possibly know about you. And that's just how people in rural communities are. That's how they are here. And usually, as long as they, when they find out that you're not a threat, they'll generally leave you alone. You'll never be a local until you're there for like 50 or 70 years or whatever. But they'll tolerate you. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Yeah, you're actually talking about 2 generations. You won't be a local until your family's been there 2 generations. And it's because that it takes 2 generations for them not to know that you haven't always been there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Is it like that in America?
Yeah, it is. As a matter of fact, our son was talking to one of the locals when we first moved in. Everybody knew. Everybody knew who we were. We hadn't met anybody yet, but they all knew who we were, and they all knew.
That's what it's like.
I'm sorry?
That's what it's like.
Mm-hmm. And they all knew about the house on the hill. Yeah, you guys live in the house on the hill. And they could describe the house on the hill. And they've never been here. But yet they all know about it. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And there's nothing that says anything on the road about who we are, the name of our farm. It's totally nondescript from the road. Totally. There's nothing that would say this is where they live. But they all know. They all know. But no one, literally, no one has offered to help us with advice and counsel. And I find that quite fascinating. And is it because farmers think that they're in competition with other farmers? I don't get it. I help people all the time. I tell them, as a matter of fact, yesterday we were in the truck with a neighbor. And I was driving. We were giving our neighbor a lift. And there was this culvert in the road with this flap of steel sticking up. And our son said to our neighbor, so when you're coming back down this road, be careful because there's that flap of steel from the culvert where the road crew just shredded the culvert. And it'll shred your tire. So be careful. I mean, that's the kind of stuff we do all the time. And it doesn't cost anything to be nice. It really doesn't. But so few people offer advice, counsel, encouragement, suggestions. It's unbelievable. We'll be right back with Guineith Isaacs, live in Australia. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Guineith, how can we reach you? You've got a website now.
Okay, I do have a website now. My website, at the moment, mostly it has to do with promoting my book, which is The Lover of the Pirate King. But it's GuineithIsaacs.com. That's www.GuineithIsaacs. That's all one word, .com. Yep. But probably I will, the other reason why I have it is because I can see what's happening with Facebook. And I'm taking a leaf out of Matt Drudge's book, and I'm taking a leaf out of Alex Jones's book. Matt Drudge many years ago told Alex Jones to make sure that he had his own website because soon all of his social media sites would go away. And so I'm going to probably be making it into something like something of a news site, you know, for what's going on in my life and what's going on around here, and more or less a place for me to post stuff that is interesting and relevant. So, yeah, definitely bookmark it. And it's a very easy website to remember anyway. I've actually had it for a little while, but last fortnight I held my breath and I shut my eyes and I forked out for a domain name. And you know something, Vincent, domain names are not cheap. They've really, really gone up since the last time I had one. I think the last time I had one was probably about 10 years ago, and I think it cost me $25 a year or something. So this one is on special. It was about, it was just under, or probably about 120 Australian, probably about $90-something US.
Wow.
And, yeah, that's actually, they were having a 50% off sale on domain names. So if you are doing a lot of stuff on the internet and posting a lot of stuff, then you know, definitely get your own domain name. Just like I said, hold your breath and shut your eyes and just pay for it, because you know especially if it's one associated with your name, and especially if you have any sort of prominent presence, you know, on the internet, like, you know, because, you know, otherwise you might find you have trouble getting the domain that you want. But anyway, there we go. What I would love to talk about, and I would really urge people, if they like adventure, romance type fiction, get in touch with me on Facebook or through email. I can be contacted for the moment at guineith@gmail.com. That's guineith@gmail.com. If you email me and you're in the continental United States, I can get a copy of my book posted out to you for $10 postpaid on Amazon, and you will not find a cheaper price than that for my book, and that helps to support my work, you know. And of that $10, I might see $6, you know, as basically pure profit, and every little bit helps, you know. And it might not seem like much, but you know, Amazon, what Norm Shealy have been saying, what Doc Ram have been saying, Amazon's not paying me my royalties. To be perfectly blunt, I don't think they like me. I don't think they like the fact that I've published a book on their site. And the thing is it's a book that basically is something of, this is how you could negotiate actually having a successful relationship. But it's a work of fiction, okay? And it's a work of fiction where, you know, in my past life I was George Wilson. I was compelled by the circumstances of my life to dress as a man and pretend to be a man. And then I found myself on Robert's ship, and Roberts had the death penalty for that. And yet when he found out about that, instead, he chose to love me. Instead of, you know, basically, according to the laws of his ship, I should have been basically shot. But that's what happened, and it was because there was a past life connection there already. But the thing is, I think that people are so screwed up. They don't know how to have relationships. They don't know how to have male and female relationships anymore. They don't know how to have romance anymore. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Absolutely. I think as you're saying that, I'm thinking about our boys. And we have two very intelligent boys. Both of them have studied martial arts for years. Both of them understands finance, economics, farming, entrepreneurship. They both have their own businesses. They both have honor and integrity. They don't cause people problems. They're both handsome. They think like their mom and dad. We live in a traditional family, and neither. But let me tell you the rest of the story. Neither one of them has a permanent girlfriend.
Yeah.
Neither one of them.
Yeah.
And
because, people have forgotten how to do that. And the people that still remember how to do that are few and far between, and they're really having a lot of problems finding each other. And I was very fortunate because both Archie and I knew how to negotiate life together as a couple. But if you wanted to have what was the theme of this book, it's these two, the two lovers in this book. They have a life that is full of challenges that you and I could not even begin to imagine, okay? And yet they managed to negotiate that life together, and they managed to find some degree of happiness. So, and if you look out there, happy couples are pretty thin on the ground. And, everybody is me first, me first, me first, me first. And they don't realize that there's a lot of give and take, but it also takes somebody to be in the lead and for the other person sometimes just to back off and just to let the other one make the decision. Does that make sense, Vincent?
it absolutely does, and I can tell you that in the case of both of our boys, the reason that neither one has a girlfriend is because their experiences has shown them that the girls of today are so me first that it's just unbearable. And the girls will say it. The girls will say, I'm selfish. I'm demanding. I'm unreasonable. But that's the way I am. Take it or leave it. And I think our boys were in the leave it department. Really? There's no give and take.
Oh my gosh.
No, seriously, I'm very serious. And they have some standards. They would appreciate finding someone who doesn't have tattoos on her face, piercings, nose rings, all kinds of metallic objects stuck in their bodies. They would appreciate finding someone who likes to think. They would like to find someone who would like to live on a farm, someone who is not addicted to substances, not addicted to social media, not addicted to spending money they don't have, someone who is willing to hold up the other end of the board. And that's like Mrs. Finelli. If she will ask all day long, you guys need anything? You guys need any help? We'll ask her, do you need any help? Anything we can do? That's the way it is at our farm. But that's not the way it is with most people. And I'm going to give you a very concrete example. When I was of dating age and I had my state-issued permit to drive a vehicle on the road, I had a 2-seater car. And when I went out on a first date with a girl, this particular car did not have all these electronic gadgets. You didn't push a button and have the doors unlock. They were manual locks. And if we were coming from, let's say we grabbed a bite to eat and we're coming to my car in the parking lot, I would go to her door and unlock her door with the key and hold the door open for her to get in. Then I'd close the door for her. Now, this is date number one. Date number one. If she reached over to unlock my door, then there could be another date. If she just sat there and didn't have the energy, the desire, or the inclination to unlock my door for me from the inside, there was no second chance. If she smoked, there was no second chance. Okay? If she wasn't polite, please, thank you, there was no second chance. Now, if she made it all the way back to my home where I lived with my parents, and let's say we were having dinner, if she sat there like a bump on the log and didn't offer to help, like help my mom cook, help my mom set the table, help whatever it was, or at the end of the meal, help clean the table, meaning bring the dishes to the kitchen sink, didn't offer to help put food in the refrigerator, just sat there, it was over right then and there. And those are expectations that our children have. They expect that the young lady is going to have some manners, is going to pitch in, and is going to be a member of the unit. And if this person is a prima donna and is not willing to help and expects to be waited on, there will be no second chance. It's as simple as that. If the young lady, well, if the female uses profanity, it's over. Okay? So we expect manners, politeness, engagement in terms of helping out. That's what we expect. And we don't expect risky behavior of any kind. So those are the requirements. So, class, if you know someone who meets those requirements, send a picture with a stamped self-addressed envelope, and we'll get back to you. I'm just kidding. But but that's what they used to say in radio. Send a stamped self-addressed envelope. We'll be right back. So I still have that very car that Mrs. Finelli and I went out on our first date in. It's a 1968 American Motors AMX. It's blue with a white stripe, 390 cubic inch engine, 4-speed, a 2-seater. And yes, she unlocked the door for me on our first date. And she helped me pull out engines many times, many engines for rebuilds. And she would rebuild them with me, and she'd work on cars with me, and she would be the mechanic's helper. And she showed interest in the things that I was interested in. As a matter of fact, she decided she wanted to buy a stereo system because that was something that people did back then. And I had a Dynaco, D-Y-N-A-C-O system that I built from a kit, many components, amplifiers, preamplifiers, tuners, things like that. And you had to solder them. So she wanted an 80-watt amplifier and a preamplifier, and she bought the kit, learned how to solder it, and built it. She did a fabulous job. So, yes, that can be done. And I believe that those are kinds of skills and traits that are lost today. I don't think young people do those things. I don't think they open the car doors for each other. I think we've lost being the ability or the desire to be polite and kind, but yet that is required here, and the boys will not compromise, and they are not interested in dating anyone who is not polite, kind, helpful, and they don't want someone who's disfigured at their own accord by doing stupid, risky behaviors. So that's where we are, Guineith.
Okay. Yeah,
what's your reaction to that?
I can absolutely see that you've raised probably some of the most sensible boys in your area. And I'm really surprised that all the women in the area, all the young ladies in the area are not falling over themselves to snap them up and to maybe make some changes to their own behaviour in order to do so. You know? This kind of segues nicely into what I was wanting to talk about today, which was how we all get along with each other. And I think I wrote that in the email that I sent you. We, as humans, are by nature tribal creatures, okay? And now, it's fine to sort of like say, well, yeah, I've bought, 20 acres of land. It's up in the Hinter Boonies, and that's my bug-out location, and when it all falls apart, that's where I'm going to go. It's got no house in it. It's got no resources on it. It's just 20 acres of land. It's got a big valley through the middle of it or whatever. But that's okay. We'll sort it out when we get there. Really. What about the people who are around you? Have you met them? Do you even know them? I assume that this is not just a 20-acre parcel of land that's just carved out in the middle of nowhere. There's probably going to be other 20-acre parcels around it. Who owns those other 20-acre parcels, and have you ever met them, and do you like them, and do you get on with them? And if you haven't met them and you don't know them, then you better pray to God in heaven that they're good and kind and nice and sensible and wise people. They are people after your own heart. And because otherwise it could get into a really, really bad situation. If you are living next door to somebody who is basically out for what they can get, it's not going to go well. If you have 20 acres of land that you've bought for the big collapse that's coming, you better make sure you move on to it ahead of time, even if you only live there part-time, even if you only live there for 2 or 3 days of the week. You better go there every weekend and do some work on your land. Begin to build up the water catchment. This is something that people don't consider, that you've actually, you can improve the amount of groundwater that is directly underneath your land. And it's well known. And, that was one of the things that I really, really took a big interest in when I was at the University of Melbourne, was catchment
Hold that thought.
management.
Guineith, one of the things that is a common thread through our discussion is that it's darn near impossible to do it without a close-knit family, to survive without a close-knit family, to survive without being a member of a tribe, if you want to use the word tribe. Very, very difficult, because it takes lots of strength to do whatever it is that's required to survive. If you look at the Amish, they get together. They have their own dialect. They have their own language. They have, we can say, a tribe. That's what it takes. That's what it takes to be successful in the endeavor. Many hands makes light work. And it's absolutely true. If you try to do it by yourself, it's really hard. That's why people go to work. They go to work because then there's the peer pressure and everybody seems to be, pulling the same way. And it works better than if we all go and do our individual thing. That's why me first doesn't work. Being selfish doesn't work. You have to be part of a village in order to be successful. But it's becoming darn near impossible to be part of a village today because of the electronics, because of social media, because of the constant contact, the addiction of these little pocket computers and transceivers called cell phones. It's impossible for many people to put those darn things down and get to work. But I can tell you that you don't have to have one. I don't have one. Now, in your neck of the woods, if they're making landlines so expensive that they're unaffordable, then maybe there's no choice. But for most people, they're addicted to their phones. Look at me, and they need that constant reminder that to themselves that yes, they are important in their own little tiny lives. But without a team, it doesn't work so well. And you were talking about in an email to me about the indigenous village, right? They work as a team.
Yeah, that's right. They worked as a team. And, this is village, a small town that was in New Zealand. It's still there, by the way. And the name of the town was called Ruatoria. That's Ruatoria. And if anyone wants to see the history of Ruatoria in New Zealand, you can go on the internet and look it up. But basically, they had a problem. There was a Maori tribe that lived there, and they had lived there for many, many hundreds of years peacefully. And absolutely beautiful location, near the sea, hardly ever any frost or wind or any, that they live next to the sea, so they did get storms come through. But it was basically like a little piece of heaven dropped down onto the earth. Okay, that's what this community, Ruatoria, was like, and it had maybe several hundred people live there. And it's the sort of community where the country was rich enough where even if you had no money whatsoever, you could go and you could get yourself a retired racehorse and you could have some sort of transport, okay, and just feed your horse off the grass that grew there. And these Maori kids who lived there, they would get these old racehorses and they would re-brake them, and that would be their transport. And, the kids would ride their horses around, and they would go to, I don't know if you ever had anything to do with Polynesian culture, but, South Asian culture. They have a big house, which is the center of the village, okay? And everybody in that village, they all know who each other is. They're all members of the same tribe. And they're all, they've been connected there for many, many generations as members of the same tribe. And each tribe or each sub-tribe has its own big house. And the members of that tribe are allowed to go to the big house at any time of the day or night and just meet there. And they meet there and they have cups of tea and they, make food and they sit and they sing, they do craft work. And it's more or less constantly, there's always something ongoing at the big house, okay? And it's in that video, there's the kids would ride into town and they would ride their horses right up to the step of the big house and look in off their horse's back and see what was going on in the big house. But the elders had told them, you're not allowed to bring the horses into the big house. But that is something that is missing in today's society. And in the Māori language, it's called marae. Okay? We're missing the concept of marae, where you've got a community of maybe several hundred people, and ultimately they're all related, but not too closely related. You've got different branches of the family, so that, you can marry into the community from outside. You can go out and you can find yourself a wife, and you can bring your wife into the community, and she'll be accepted as long as she's with you in the community, And but like I say, that's something that's really lacking. In this particular community, they had such cohesion, and it was such a beautiful place, and they were all such at peace that the blue team had to go in and start burning things down to begin to create division in this community. Okay? And for a while it worked. And this went on for maybe 2 or 3 years. And you were getting churches getting burnt down, and you were getting houses burnt down. And then the blue team would come in and say, oh, we arrested so-and-so. So-and-so was responsible. And never allowing the man himself to, give a good account of himself. Probably it wasn't him at all. And, afterwards it did come out that it was the blue team. It was the police going and burning down the churches and going and burning down houses in this beautiful, peaceful community just to make trouble. I'm sure that doesn't shock you, Vincent, but it probably does disgust you.
Of course. Of course.
And what happened was this community, a related tribe from another part of the country heard what was going on there, and there was, people from that tribe, they've gotten together a band, which was reasonably successful, and this band, they were beginning to do, backing acts, and, the first act on stage for some pretty big and important bands. And they were beginning to sell a lot of albums themselves because they were really good. And they said, we're going to go and we're going to help our brothers in this community, even though we've never met them. We're going to do our album launch in this community. Okay? And in New Zealand, like I say, they were getting to be a very, very prominent band in New Zealand. And the name of the band was called Herbs. And they put together an album, and they called this album Sensitive to a Smile. Okay? And you can go on you can go on YouTube and listen to the song Sensitive to a Smile by Herbs. And it's an absolutely beautiful song. And they did the album launch with all the media publicity that was associated with it. And you know what, Vincent? They said, we got to the town and it was nothing like the press had been saying about it. It was a beautiful place. It was a peaceful place. We had the best times. There was kids riding their horses up the middle of the road and just meeting together and hanging out and having little horse races around, and this sort of thing. Taking the horses down to the beach and having a swim. And then they'd all go home. And it was peaceful and it was happy. And it was cohesive. And the community, they loved each other. And, the fact that they did that album launch in that town completely in one weekend put an end to all of the rubbish and the destructiveness that the Blue Team had been doing. After that, they gave up and they stopped it. How's that? That's what I'm talking about. People actually going out and helping each other. This was not even the same tribe, but it was all of the Maori tribes in New Zealand. They all related. They all came off of, there were people in New Zealand before the Maori got there. The Maori people, they came from 10 canoes, okay? And each canoe landed in a particular place and basically over a period of time took control of the land that was there. And, they married into the people who were already there, and sometimes they went to war and, defeated the people who were already there. And that's how the world has always operated, But they found a way to live at peace and negotiate conflict without it erupting into a massive war. Because they'd been through a time, even as recently as 200 years ago, New Zealand was in such a state that, that they were in danger, the Maori people were actually in danger of wiping themselves out through intertribal conflict. But they learnt a way to go and talk to your neighbours and negotiate with them and come to an agreement where you didn't wipe yourself out through warfare. That's what we're all going to have to do if we're going to survive this coming collapse. Because there is a collapse coming. It's going to be bad. You're going to have to probably deal with a lot of people that you don't know that are moving into your area as refugees, And if anybody comes camping on my land, I'm going to see them off. Because that is the natural way of humanity. If you've got land, you must defend that land, or you're going to be pushed off it. And I'm going to defend my land. I'm not going to let some random interloper with a tent come and camp on my land. But if there's a war, then they're going to lose. I hope it doesn't come to that, but I think that, if I project that attitude of this is my land, you're not going to come on it. If you want to go and live in the state forest up the road, go for it. There's 10,000 acres of state forest up the road. Go and pitch your tent there, but you're not having my land. And it's coming to that sort of balance that is the key. And like I say, it's all this sociology of collapse and of preparedness that people have to understand. Or all the rest of it is just not going to be worth it because you're not going to survive. You're going to end up falling into conflict, needless conflict, or you're going to end up bending over and having somebody take everything that you've worked so hard to achieve.
We'll be right back.
Does that make sense?
We'll be right back. Absolutely. We'll be right back. Have you experienced growing moringa trees, Moringa, in Australia?
They do grow here. I have heard of them. I'm not sure how well they would grow in our location because we get frost.
Okay, that's
here.
the problem. That's the problem with moringa. But Dr.
It would be dry enough.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
It would be dry enough, but we do get frost. And sometimes the frosts are quite heavy. Sometimes on a really, really cold, frosty morning, you'll go out and there'll be 1/4 of an inch thick ice on the dog's water.
Yeah, that's a problem. I'm going to try to grow them here. I let our class know that I ordered some seeds and I ordered some saplings. They were $6 a piece, and I'll keep you posted as to how this all goes. Norm Shealy has been talking about how beneficial these trees are, and you can just eat the leaves. So if things get very bad, you can eat the leaves, but they have so many health benefits, we should be eating them anyway. So, but they can grow to 30 feet tall. So that could be a problem for growing indoors, but I'll let you all know how it goes. So, Guineith, the point of this is we have to work together. It's really tough to be an island because we need each other's help, but yet people don't want to work together. And that's what's happened. But back in the 1800s, we did work together. We did know our neighbors. And I can tell you, even in the 1970s, we started distancing ourselves from our neighbors. Back then, Mrs. Finelli and I lived in a neighborhood, and there were 6 properties that touched ours, and I knew 3 of them. 3. But that was after maybe, a decade. But back in the 1960s, it was different. Back just 10 years before that, people did know, or 20 years before that, people did know their neighbors. They did have little get-togethers where the neighbors would be invited to each other's houses, and they would have little dinner parties, and that was normal back then. But now, does anybody have a dinner party? I haven't heard of one. We invite friends and neighbors over, during the holidays. We think it's the right thing to do. We want to do it. We like doing it. But I don't see many other people doing it. They have their family over, but do they invite friends? And do you think it's the same way in Australia?
Yeah, I would absolutely say that it is. And, I came into this area and I basically knew nobody in the area. And that was 6 years ago now. And I've made a few friends, and that's good. And I'm actually really thanking God because most of my neighbours I get on quite well with. There's only one set of neighbours that I don't get on well with, and surprise, surprise, nobody in the area seems to get on well with this group of people. Everybody hates them because they were born here and they have been the local bad guys for generations. And they own, probably about at least 5,500 acres of land. And those, we've got 500-odd acres up the back of our place, which is on our back boundary, which is owned by them. And across the road, we've got about 5,000 acres, which is owned by them, But the other neighbours, they're all fine. But as soon as you mention this family, that owns this 5,500 acres, everybody just rolls their eyes and begins uttering expletives, which is the Australian way of saying we don't like them very much, And that's just how it is. But most of the rest of the people around here have been really good. And the only exception that I would say to that has been the government workers and the blue team. The government workers around here are horrible, and the blue team's horrible. But most of the ordinary villagers are great. So you can talk to them, you can call them up if there's a problem, and just sort of sort things out. And one day we had one of their sheep come across and just decided that it was going to camp itself in our paddock. We called them up and they came straight over and picked it up and said, thank you very much for, confining our sheep. And, I said, oh, that's all right. But I can just about guarantee that if it had been the guys up the back whose property that the sheep had wandered onto, that it would have either ended up in the freezer, or it probably would have ended up in the freezer. It probably wouldn't have ended up back in its home flock.
Right.
Because, they have thousands of sheep on their own, but if they get somebody's sheep that wanders onto their land, then they're likely to just get that sheep and just kill it just for the sake of, having somebody else.
We're out of time.